Hello, guys, and welcome to the Texas Association of Builders Zoom at Noon virtual education series sponsored by Hotchkiss Insurance. My name is Jessica Gehring with Hotchkiss Insurance. Our goal is to offer an opportunity for you to gain new strategies and stay on top of the latest within our industry as you continue to adapt to the new circumstances. In the event, we can assist you with any of your insurance needs, including general liability, builder's risk, workers' comp, employee benefits, equipment, surety, and bonds. Please call us at Hotchkiss Insurance. We are here to support the success of your business. In today's session, Navigating the New World, we will be a panel exploring with you information on the economic implications of what we have experienced and what we can realistically expect as we recover from the year's events and move forward. In this post-coronavirus world, fluctuations in the economy and upcoming elections make this an unprecedented time in the United States. And these issues may have on the Texas building industry. Our panel of experts will bring their insight into what we might expect through 2020 and into 2021. Our panelists today are Aaron Graham, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Highland Homes, wave. Tom Jacobs, Regional President of MI Homes, Inc., and Bill Meyer, Regional President of Newland. And our panel will be moderated today by Bob Burton, who is a shareholder in Winstead's Real Estate Development and Investments Practice Group. Bob, please take it from here.
Good afternoon, officially. I'd like to thank TAB for organizing this session, Hotchkiss for sponsoring, and each of you for joining us today. We have three excellent panelists and for this educational series, and I'd like to give a little bit more color on their introduction in a minute. However, I want to put out a little bit of information about what we're going to do today. I know this series was titled Navigating the New World, and that's a bit too ambitious for the group, since I don't think anyone, certainly not our panelists, not I, know where we will settle as an industry or a society as a result of all the changes we have seen this year. What we are experiencing will have unprecedented societal effects. And I know many of you on the call and our panelists are really responding in many cases in real time to these changes. We thought it would be more sensible to talk about some of the effects these changes have had on development and home building and responses to these changes our panelists have seen in the market, with a little bit of future casting, but without warranty, not even a limited warranty. So first, Aaron Graham, who, as Jessica mentioned, is Senior Vice President of Marketing at Highland Homes. Aaron joined Highland in 2006 as Vice President of Operations in the DFW market. And in 2017, he was asked to lead the sales and marketing efforts company-wide. Tom Jacobs, as Jessica mentioned, with MI Homes. Tom actually oversees four markets in Texas, and also Indianapolis, Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis. And he's been in the industry for 32 years. With MI, Ryland, and Kimball Hill, and has really worked on projects from coast to coast. Bill Meyer is Regional President of Newland. Bill provides senior and strategic leadership for developing mixed-use communities in Newland's West region. And those of you who don't know, Newland is really a national planned community developer. And the West region that Bill oversees includes Austin, Houston, Dallas, Denver, Portland, and Seattle. Bill has 30 years of experience in all aspects of real estate development and has worked on some of the top selling communities in Austin, Houston, and San Diego. So we really want to kind of start out at the beginning, kind of the beginning of the process of development. And those are to talk a little bit about the transactional effects that we've seen and a little bit of historical context here, recent historical context. Many of you recall that in mid-March, when the pandemic first hit, we had a multiple of local jurisdictions issuing local orders, and it was really a tapestry of different and often confusing requirements, conflicting orders, and just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And really, at the end of the March, thankfully, from my perspective, the governor issued an order, a statewide order, attempting to create some uniformity in these regulations. And I don't know about you, but personally, that 2 or 3 week period between when the local orders went out and the governor's order was finally issued was probably the most concentrated, stressful time in our industry that really I can recall. And I've probably purposefully forgotten the Great Recession. But in any event, it was a stressful time. Now, what I saw as partially a transactional lawyer working on acquisition and disposition of either lots, acquisition of developments or lots on behalf of public home builders or builders I represent, was really a pause and reevaluation on the acquisition side early on, that during that first kind of 2 or so week period. We looked very carefully at contract terms and went through an evaluation of the process for evaluation of each specific deal, whether to exit those deals for those deals were still in feasibility early, maybe a particular project where it wasn't looking so good and the decision was perhaps needed to be made more quickly, or really ask for extensions to closings. But it really did seem like this phase passed pretty quickly, and we were right back to business as usual, if not at an even faster pace. So I'm going to throw this out to the panel. Each of you have had involvement in the acquisition or sale of lots and land, and I'm curious what effects early, mid, late pandemic, and even post-pandemic this has had on your transactions. So I'll start with Aaron. Aaron, you want to make a few comments?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. First of all, you're right. It was a relatively quick period of time, but it certainly didn't feel quick when we were in the middle of the 3 to 4 weeks. It was evaluating everything, and we did approach developers and said, "Hey, can we pause on some takedowns of lots? Can we hold off before we sign the contract for that next phase?" And that did last for about 3 to 4 weeks. There was just so much uncertainty. But the market quickly came back, showed a resilience, maybe even a little pent-up demand during that time. And so it was a relatively short period of time, but my gosh, it felt like longer than 3 to 4 weeks.
So Tom, you've mentioned in one of our pre-calls that your initial thought that this would be another home builder Armageddon 2.0.
Yeah, in March, ironically, I was in California when everything started shutting down. I was in Palm Springs on an annual trip with my family, and watching it from there was the beginning of the thought of, oh, here we go, Armageddon 2.0, with 1.0 being the Great Recession we all worked our way through. From the beginning as a company, our approach was, we said, let's try to not make any big decisions until we get through June. So that meant let's not lay anyone off, make decisions on that. And we ended up getting through this entire process without any layoffs at all. Let's try not to move forward where we can avoid it on purchases until we have some clarity in the market, which again, we thought would be through the end of June. But at the same time, let's be very careful in analyzing every project. And so where we went to sellers and maybe we were in a situation we couldn't get more time, we elected not to ultimately walk away from anything we were doing. And in fact, as we approached that midterm, to Aaron's point, where we got kind of past Easter and things got better, we ultimately ended up being opportunistic and even picked up a couple of projects in divisions where we maybe had a competitor that blinked and was more concerned. So I think to what you said at the beginning about the title of this being Navigating the New World, and None of us know what that new world is, as you so well described. In fact, I think from the day one, it's been prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and then deal every day with whatever the facts are that are presented to us. And I'm not sure that I feel that much differently today in terms of that's how we're approaching it. We're just thankful that we're in a business that has wind at our back right now.
Amen.
So, Bill, Tom and Aaron, they're taking it really from a buyer's perspective, but you've got the seller perspective. What did you see? How did you respond to it? And I don't know, this may be a stretch, but what do you think this bodes for the future, if anything?
Well, we made a decision early on that we were going to approach, we did get some calls from builders saying, hey, we need to delay a takedown or extend the due diligence period or whatever. And we just made a decision. We're going to look at each case individually. We're not going to have a blanket policy that we're going to do this for everybody or whatever. And I think we probably ended up across the portfolio, maybe amending 5 deals, maybe 6. So very few number of deals. And every transaction was, included a provision to get us basically whole by the end of the year. But, where we were coming from is we started off the first 4 weeks of the year, we were averaging about 120 home sales a week across our portfolio. And I remember having this conversation with our CEO in February saying, gee, I don't ever remember a time in this business that I've been in it that everything has been hitting on all cylinders the way it is. What could go wrong? Well, home sales dropped to about 33 the second week of March. And then there was, oh boy, now what? But now we're back up averaging about 115, 120 sales a week again. So, and we're pretty much ahead at all at all projects. But to go back to your question, yeah, we had to restructure a few deals, not significantly. The biggest impact we saw really was more on the commercial, particularly retail and multifamily transactions really got hit with a hard pause. We had a target transaction in one market, and because of some of the stuff that happened in Minneapolis, they just put everything on hold for a year. And the target's the right thing for the property, the right thing for the community, so we're sticking with them. But it's painful to have that put off for a full year.
So and one of the phenomenons that we've seen, probably over the last 5 to 10 years, is these mixed use communities. You're in Newland, you've done several of them where you've got a residential component, but you've got a robust commercial component. And whether that's inline retail or, grocery stores or community retail or whatnot. And you've seen have you seen a pullback from those commercial transactions? How does that potentially kind of affect the overall vision of the planned community with that commercial and residential interaction, if at all?
Not so much really. It just depends on the type of use. Daycares kind of got put on pause for a while because they were closed. But interestingly enough, convenience stores started coming out of the woodworks. And other buyers, we had a rush of activity on some certain parcels. So it's a mixed bag depending on what service and product is being provided and how impacted their business is as to, whether they felt like they needed to expand. And maybe someone were doing what Tom's talking about, taking advantage of other people pausing and trying to get some good sites. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch it unfold.
So let's move a little bit to, because all of these projects that whether you're selling or you're buying, they all have a strong entitlement component, which means that they have to go through a local regulatory process with respect to either zoning or platting. And sometimes, if it's a commercial or non-traditional residential, you've got a site planning process. So, the fact is that what we've experienced has pushed most of these hearings that you have to go through, whether a platting process or a zoning process, into the virtual world. And last session, we had House Bill 3167, which is known as the shot clock rule, which tried to speed up the subdivision process, but as you know, as many of you know, that's, and I think generously, either been a mixed success or, depending on your perspective, a mixed failure. And I've heard stories, you know, that initially there was a good deal of dysfunction when these hearings went remote, and it really slowed down the approval process. But to a certain extent, maybe some of that has stabilized. So I'm curious how you view this new development, the kind of the virtual online regulatory meeting, how that's affected your development process and deliveries, and if you have any thoughts as far as how you work through that. Bill, you want to chime in?
Yeah, most of our regulatory work is really at the staff level at this point. You know, at the point in time in our portfolio, we don't do a lot of discretionary entitlement work. We typically pick things up after that's done, but still not being able to meet with staff face to face, and just some of the delays and things back and forth has definitely slowed things down. Frankly, I think some jurisdictions are using it as an excuse to intentionally slow things down. Those that are more business friendly have figured out ways to make it work and keep the process humming. So I think it's really a hit or miss.
So Tom, any observations from your perspective, from kind of the buyer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we fit in both categories because we're a finished lot buyer from Newland and other developers across the state. We also self-develop, depending on the market, a healthy percentage of our properties. I mean, ultimately, we're also even a seller, so we sell in like a joint venture in San Antonio to Highland, amongst others, in West Point. And so we fit all of those categories. I think the number one thing that strikes me is Bill nailed it, which is the jurisdictions that really are anti-building, anti-growth. They've embraced these challenges as an opportunity to slow things down. Those that are pro-business and want us there have figured out ways to work through it. The shot clock rule to me was one of those things that even pre-pandemic was sort of fit the same thing. Jurisdictions that really didn't want us there were using the kind of the shot clock rule against us by eliminating the ability to concurrently process different parts of the entitlements and then just kicking things back. So they kick it back within the shot clock rule so that they could start the process over again. And so I think the parallel there is simply that jurisdictions that are pro-business, pro-builder and developer, they've found ways to work with us. Those that really don't want us there have leveraged it as a way to slow the process down.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that I've observed, I mean, I don't do a lot of regulatory hearings, but I talk to people that do, is that the dynamic in these hearings is much different when they're done virtually. I mean, when you're on the dais and you're trying to explain a particular benefit to your project, it's really hard to connect with those particular folks that are either on the planning commission or city council. Often, and we're doing it here, we're doing a good job of it here, people have a tendency to talk over one another and interrupt, you know, and so it's just not as efficient of a process. And that advocacy part is really something that has gone down and is to a certain extent not as, you know, not as, it's something that you really don't benefit as much from on the advocacy part, being able to look at different people in the eyes, make points to different members on the planning commission. That's just something that I've seen or heard about.
We'll add one thing, Bob, and that is we're still lucky to be in Texas. We had one jurisdiction, Washington State, where construction was not considered an essential business. And so we were completely shut down for several months. And that really impacts your lot delivery schedule because you only have about a 9 or 10 month window that you can develop lots in that market. We were very concerned we were going to miss our deliveries this year, but fortunately we got them all in and are getting those lots closed, as we speak. But again, glad to be in Texas.
So Aaron,
I'll echo that really quickly, simply because Michigan, where we build in Detroit, was the same. Construction was not an essential business. They shut us down 100%. You couldn't see potential customers by appointment even. Sales offices were closed for close to 90 days. Construction had to stop completely, including structures that in theory that were not weathered in were supposed to just be left abandoned. We chose to continue and get things weathered in and run the risk of running afoul of the authorities on that, to the extent that our vendors would work with us. And so, yes, there's reasons, as there always has been, to be thankful to be in Texas and doing business as Bill does in other parts of the country. You get reminded of that often.
So, Aaron, any observations?
Well, no, just after what Bill and Tom said, I'm just glad we're a 100% Texas only builder. So there you go. Pretty grateful.
Yeah, good. Well, so I know I didn't, we didn't talk about as much this on a pre-call, but it occurs to me, and I want to ask, especially given that Bill and Tom, you're working in other markets. Have you gotten any sense that there may be a more permanent change with there's this trend about working remotely. We've heard about it's accelerating what was something that was going to happen in any event. I mean, is there any discussion or talk that you've heard about cities maybe moving to a virtual approval process, perhaps post-pandemic, or that hasn't come up yet?
I haven't heard that yet. I think they're still trying to figure out what's going on right now versus what the future looks like. But I don't have any input on that.
Okay.
I would agree with Bill on that. We've not heard anything like that really in any of the markets that we do business. And, I think for the most part, they're right or wrong. There's an assumption that at some point we'll go back to normal in terms of those types of activities. But what normal will look like, I think, is beyond the scope of any of us to take a guess at this point.
Right. So let's move, let's talk a little bit about changes in location maybe. We've heard reports certainly in the media and the news about the migration of folks from the denser urban areas to the suburb, and maybe the pandemic and the uncertainty accelerating. I know it has to do with the interest rate as well, but accelerating the decision of the first-time home buyers, some of which may have been sitting on the fence. So they're finally entering the market. So I'm wondering if you can discuss what you've seen related to these trends. In particular, have they affected lot size, how you are thinking about maybe developing these communities, the product mix, amenity design, more focused on the lots, the design of the developments, what's popular. So Tom, I know you talked a little bit about the less infill product when we had our pre-call.
Sure. And in fact, we have in Indianapolis an urban infill project, and with all of the demand that has exploded across the country, driven, in my view, largely by the interest rates. There's other catalysts with the pandemic and whatnot, but I think that if we had all of these same factors, but we had 5% rates, we wouldn't see the level of demand that we have. So I really think that the number one driver is interest rates. But across my entire landscape, we're really strong demand, except for this one project that's a urban infill near downtown Indianapolis, and that buyer has just dried up. They don't want to be there. Interestingly enough, we've had some very specific conversations on it, that those were largely millennial buyers. or younger, and they're getting a lot of advice from their parents. This is what they're telling us that says, hey, you don't, that's not the choice that you want to make. And so the other thing that we're seeing, and I would bet that Aaron has seen this as well, is that we're seeing in particularly Dallas and Houston, more and more buyers that are coming from New York and other places. They're people that say, hey, we can work remotely, and we're getting out of that urban environment that we lived in New York or Chicago or something like this. We build a really broad array of products. So just within Texas, we probably start as low as 170,000 in some individual communities and run into base prices in the mid sixes. And so I think in terms of buyer demand, it's a very different spectrum. At that higher price point, maybe 350s and up, there's maybe a little bit more of a demand in terms of saying, hey, we really would like things that are conducive to working from home, dual offices, Zoom rooms, etc. When you get to that lower price buyer, very, very much more focused on just the fact that, hey, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I can buy a home. These interest rates are terrific. Most of them typically are maybe not from employment bases where they have the option of working from home. So less of a demand there. So that changes way, way broadly across the different buyer spectrums for us in terms of what we're seeing. But I think that they're going to continue to move to the suburbs at this point. I don't see that as a near-term change.
One of the things, Tom, that you mentioned, I raised the question about, because I think, a few years ago, you guys would know better than I do, there was this trend to move toward the smaller lot size on some of the projects. But you made a point that, you can't respond that quickly because, a lot of this stuff is already in the pipeline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It hasn't had an impact on us. I mean, I think that maybe we've seen some of the legacy larger lot products that we have gotten a little bit more buoyancy than they did have. But in terms of what we're building day to day, or really in terms of something we're entitling to put on the ground 2 years from now, we're not really shifting what we're doing. The dynamics of being largely 50-foot lots kind of as a typical, and seeing some that are smaller lots down to, we do a lot of 40-foot lot product in San Antonio, for instance, due to affordability. I haven't really seen that change. And because we have such long cycles to bring lots to the market, or to, the market that the developers are bringing lots to us, they have that same issue. I really haven't seen a shift, and I'm not particularly anticipating one.
So Aaron, I know that you had talked a little bit about the lot size creeping up. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your observations?
Yeah, and by the way, I should mention earlier, we were talking about being declared an essential service in the state of Texas. Being the Texas only builder, it's probably appropriate for me to acknowledge and recognize the hardworking folks at Texas Association of Builders who lobbied to make sure that we were an essential service. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? So it's been interesting. Obviously, the low interest rates have been a big topic of discussion, not just today, but for the last several months, about driving new demand for new homes. And obviously, the lower interest rates improved affordability for a while until lumber got crazy and we had to raise home prices. But COVID-19 did trigger a few interesting things. Seeing people buying on larger lots more so now, or current pandemic, than pre-pandemic. And there's a lot for that. One is, I think it's within reach. There's the affordability thing, but part of it is this whole YOLO concept. You only live once. And there are people after this pandemic who are saying, I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm going to go buy what I want. And that has actually increased the absorption of our larger lots. But a couple other things that I think have triggered this increased new demand that aren't really impacted by interest rates. One of them is this dramatically reduced existing home supply. People with homes to sell just didn't want to, and in some cases today don't want to let people in their homes to show their homes for fear of spreading the virus. And some of that continues today. So we've seen a restriction or a lessening of the existing home supply, and that's shifted a lot of buyers to new home construction. The other is the fear of the virus really has prompted some to consider living in less densely populated urban areas. I was joking on the pre-call with Bob that I was speaking with one of our buyers who was moving from an apartment and asking her why she was considering a new home. And she says, I don't want to live somewhere with shared air. So somewhere with shared air. That was the first time I'd heard that term. And then I think one other factor, Bob, if I may, that's pushing people out into the more less densely populated areas is this whole new work from home norm that has allowed buyers to rethink how far away from their employment center that they're willing to live. Now, some of those work from home situations are going to be permanent. Some of them are going to be temporary. Some of them are going to be a hybrid where you only have to come into the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And so people have rethought, you know what, I can live 40 minutes from where I work, or I can live an hour from where I work. And we've seen a tremendous surge in sales in communities that are a little further out from the major urban areas.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, and it's not Texas, but our Seattle-based project is actually in Pierce County, which is the southern county, King County being the primary county where Seattle is, Pierce County being where Tacoma is. And historically, we've never seen any King County buyers because it's just too far for somebody to go into downtown Seattle or up to Redmond for employment. And now we're seeing those buyers, and they're coming out in droves. Yeah. And it's interesting. These, density, high dense environment is sort of a relative term. Our project west of Portland is an average density of like 12 to 15 units per acre, but it's suburban. It's considered suburban in that market. And again, those buyers are coming out. But I think the appeal of the suburban home, and then what will follow possibly is the appeal of the suburban office building. I think the suburban office is going to make a comeback. I think that's a phenomenon that's, hate to predict anything, but I think that's something that's probably here to stay. Well, not
yeah, that's kind of interesting because I do a lot of condos and townhome product in all around Texas, and what I've seen is that some of the denser product move out to the suburbs. So, seeing that, the duplex product or the triplex or the fourplex product actually going into some planned communities, which I think, Bill, you have, you at least have a denser product in Rancho Siena, I believe, as well. So.
Yeah, and going back to, I don't know if it was Tom or Aaron's point about higher priced homes, we're seeing quite a bit of that as well. Where we're selling custom lots directly to individuals in one project, or just more demand for 70-foot and 80-foot lots than we've seen in the past. And one of our Denver projects has sold, I want to say 25 homes over $1 million this year. Wow. And this, I was there probably a little over a year ago, and there was like 1 or 2 houses in this neighborhood. Now it's just blowing up. So it's, I think that's a phenomenon. Yeah, what's going on.
So let's, and Aaron mentioned it a little bit, but let's transition in talking about home design and the product on the ground, and specifically because of the working from home, the expansion of online school instruction. How has that affected, or what are you seeing with regard to buyer choices, home design considerations, things of that nature? So Aaron, I know that you had some observations on this. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Many of our buyers are requesting 2 workspaces, for example, either for 2 spouses that are working, or to have a workspace for one spouse and the other for homeschooling or virtual schooling. We've launched several what we call livability options that include a second place, a second study, or an enhanced laundry room, or turning a 3rd car tandem bay into a fitness room. There's even been, we've got a lot of feedback that in our studies, we typically put like wood floors, and they're like, no, we want carpet, we want proofing. Everybody's on these Zoom calls and they don't want the echo effect. In fact, based on buyer demand, we've launched some really simple options for noise reduction that you'll just insulate a little more the study and the master bedroom, just so people can have some space and some privacy. But this also goes back to why there's a little bit more new home demand, in our opinion. Many buyers have new needs as they live in their homes differently. And when they go out to the existing market for existing homes and they can't, first of all, there's not as much supply as there used to be. And on top of that, they can't find what they need. There aren't that many existing homes on the market that have 2 offices, for example. There aren't that many that have a fitness room in the home. And so this has driven a lot more new buyer demand, in our opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Any other observations?
Well, I agree with that. I think in some ends of the spectrum, lower price points, it's as simple as making sure that you have a good location for a wireless access point for your internet so that they can get good Wi-Fi distribution throughout the whole house. Or it may be offering WAP drops to a patio area so that if they want to, sit outside on their laptop, they can do that as well. And then I think the other end of the spectrum, as Aaron, described really well, is there are some people that want and can afford pretty complicated setups. And so I think for us, it's not been so much that we had to reinvent the wheel as to take things that already existed, that we already had, but package them to make it easy for the consumer to understand what their choices are and ways that could facilitate the way that they're living in the home today and anticipate living in the home in the future.
So, Aaron, you dropped the lumber bomb. So I'm going to transition a little bit to talking about the building process and the effects. We've heard a lot about issues with manufacturing and the supply chain distortions, a lot on the news about technology. The iPhone announcement is a month later because of the supply chain or technology bottlenecks. And I was, and as you mentioned, lumber prices have gone through the roof. So what have you seen, Tom, particularly? I know you had some thoughts about this, and how is that affecting the building process and pricing?
I think that it has been I think of when my kids were young, you'd take them to the arcade and you'd play that game Whack-A-Mole. And that's what this has been like, because we have no way to anticipate which mole is popping out of the hole next, but they consistently do. So one day we can't get condensing units for the air conditioning systems, and then it's some other obscure thing because it has a part made from China, or appliances, I think, for the industry have been this consistent issue, and it's been driven by a couple of different things. So you had plants that in March and April, I think we had manufacturers that overreacted and said, oh, it is going to be Armageddon. So they drew down capacity. Then you add in complications like the third shift now, instead of manufacturing product, is deep cleansing of the plant. And so they have the inability to ramp up capacity. And then you hate to say it, they've all dealt with scenarios of people saying, I don't want to come back to work yet because this stimulus has made it more profitable for me to stay home than to come to work and be employed. And so that's been a challenge. And so day by day, we just react to what comes up next. Is it going to be tile? Is it going to be granite that comes from this particular region, et cetera? And I think that what we're seeing on the forefront coming at us now, as we seem to be getting a little relief on lumber, at least it's not continuing to go up, knock on wood, no pun intended. But I think we're going to see cost pressures from these other areas because demand is just continued to remain really strong. And so I do think affordability is going to be a concern because these rates may stay low for a while, but when you're talking about planning for 2 and 3 years into the future, are we going to be sub 3% in 2023? I don't know. That would, if I had to bet one way or the other, I'd probably bet no. So I think the affordability is going to be a challenge, and these manufacturing issues are going to contribute to it this next year, where maybe they didn't this year. Lumber was the big bad boogeyman for us this year.
Yeah, supply chain whack-a-mole. I'm using that, Tom. That's
I
awesome.
like it.
You can
It's
have
supply
it.
chain whack-a-mole. And by the way, lumber has calmed down a little bit. If it ticks up for us over the next month, it's your fault. It's jinxed it.
Please don't.
So I want to talk about a kind of a new product out there that I think that, at least from my perspective, I've seen mature over the past, say, 5 or so years, and certainly in the last couple of years, and actually seen an uptick, is the build to rent product. You know, we've seen several public builders and private builders get into this space really as a separate product line. And some companies we're working with exclusively develop this product. You know, this is different than the trend we saw right after the Great Recession, where we had investment companies that were coming in and buying up foreclosed homes. This really seems to be a more mature and intentional product line. And I wonder if it's partly in response to the movement trend to the suburbs, or an effort to achieve affordability, allow renters to participate in the kind of the planned community lifestyle, if you will. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the build to rent a product. Is it here to stay? Do you think it'll expand or contract? From what I hear in the industry, there's a big rush. It's like the gold rush right now, but it's something that is going to stabilize. It's not going to supplant home ownership, but it's probably a niche product that's here to stay for those sophisticated operators.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, we don't do it and have no intention of doing it. Our view has been that we have a hard time staying up with the demand on for sale housing, and it's what we do. And I think we sort of just tend to look at the fact that we should stick to our knitting. Let's do what we're good at. We're a good merchant builder. We're a good developer of single family lots. And we think we can run a good business doing that. I do think it'll stabilize and that it's here to stay. I kind of welcome it because I think that a lot of those people are future homeowners, and maybe they skip to a move up level home or something as opposed to going into an entry level home initially. I think it ultimately probably has a bigger impact on the apartment side than it does on for sale housing. So I kind of welcome what they're doing. It doesn't fit our business model, but I can see where it has been a good model for a lot of people. And I do think, to your point, it does allow renters to participate in a different lifestyle, particularly to Aaron's shared air point earlier, get away from that shared air. So that's one I'm going to use, Aaron, because you've been doing this a long time. You've probably used the toenail clippings in the carpet.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you don't even have to use that one anymore. Now it's the COVID droplets in the air. So.
Well,
So,
I do think.
sorry.
I was just going to say, I do think it's a trend that's going to stay. I'm not sure COVID affected it much either way. I think it was a trend that was coming pre-COVID. But part of it is what we've observed is, and Highland has set up a separate business to approach single family rental. It's because of just lifestyle choice. Some of it's they can't afford a new home, or they can't afford a home or a down payment, or they have some financial constraint. But in a lot of cases, it's a lifestyle choice. They don't want to own a home, but they want to live in a home. And so between that and the financial side, I think there's a real market there. And I do think it's going to stabilize. Right now, it may be a little crazy. Everyone's chasing it, lots of money chasing it, but I think it'll settle down. I don't mean to cut you off, Bill.
No. I was going to say, yeah, there's a lot of capital chasing it right now for sure. From my perspective, I think it's a great market segment for a master plan community. If you can kind of get over some of the downside risk with it, it's potentially, there are those lifestyle renters that it's a permanent choice. They'll never buy a home because they like the flexibility it offers and the low maintenance lifestyle. I was listening to a panel a few weeks ago, and people from the Northeast are, renting single family detached homes and communities in Florida and just using them 6 months out of the year, but paying for them for 12 months out of the year. They can keep their stuff there. They don't have to go to a hotel or whatever. So, but they don't have the burdens of ownership. So I think it's definitely here to stay. From our perspective, we just have to be careful of our biggest thing is making sure a complex, if you will, stays a complex and doesn't end up getting sold off as individual homes at some point in time and potentially disrupt the market. And also that there's, common maintenance that's taken care of, that it doesn't detract from the rest of the community. But if we can get over those hurdles, and we have in a couple of markets, and I think we'll see more of it. Going back to Tom's point, right now we're having a hard time keeping up with our single family builder friends, keeping them lots supplied. So trying to get out ahead for another, 100, 150 for a single family for inch has been a challenge, but we're trying to get there.
Well, so let's talk a minute about marketing technology. There's been a lot of talk and action on adjusting the marketing and sales process to all of the changes that we've seen over the last few months to, address health concerns, social distancing, whether it's virtual appointments, tours by appointments, a more online, robust online presence, whatever the case may be. So how have your companies responded to these changes? And are some of these tools here to stay? I mean, is this another example of the pandemic accelerating a trend that was really already on its way? Aaron, you want to start with this?
I think you're exactly right, Bob. The trend was there, and this just accelerated it. So when the pandemic hit, like most, we closed our offices and made them open by appointment only. And that was just out of the safety and concern of the health and well-being of our own people and our buyers and our realtor friends. And we did that after every appointment, cleaned down, did the whole thing. We quickly came to realize, and I'd like to say that it was forethought on our part, but we quickly came to realize that the customer experience being open by appointment only was just so much better. We became much more efficient, much more effective, and people kept their appointments. So what started out as purely a concern for safety and health and well-being became really an improvement in customer service. We did launch several tools, and we are able to do virtual tours. Most people are wanting to come back and see things in person, but we still sell a contract or two every week of someone who wanted to do it virtually over a Zoom call or over Google Duo. So those things are here to stay. It is interesting how the top of the funnel for us is still very, very active, lots of lead generation, et cetera, lots of live chats, but the appointment setting has just really gone through the roof. Now, we were requiring it, but we have in our offices, if people want to come by and they're not an appointment, there's a sign there that says, we're available for an appointment now. And more people are coming by, but so many people want to schedule that appointment in advance. We use some simple applications. Calendly is one we use. You're able to schedule an appointment, and we just became, I mean, I don't even know if I can measure how much more efficient and effective it's become. Today, actually, we are still open by appointment. We haven't reopened our doors. So if you want to see one of our models, you need to set an appointment. And if you walk up to one of our models and the door is locked, but the sign says we're available for an appointment now, they'll see you. We've just decided, partly again, because we still are unsure. There's a lot of different conflicting noise about COVID, but honestly, it's been so effective and efficient. We've kept the model.
So you called it, I think you called it the barbershop model, right?
I think was that Tom?
Oh, is that Tom?
I don't know. Well, the one thing is people used to just, the norm was you just stop by the model, it'll be open for you, right? Now you have to set an appointment. So if you're just like if you had to set an appointment to see your attorney, or you want to set an appointment to see your doctor, or set an appointment to see a consultant or an engineer. And now in new home sales, setting that appointment, it's kind of elevated the industry just a little bit.
I would say we're very similar to Aaron and Highland, except that we did, eventually reopen our doors to walk-in traffic. I would say that 90% of our interactions, though, with our customers are by appointment at this point, because the customers want that. We source most of our leads through the internet, and they go through our internet sales managers, and they schedule appointments. It's the desired approach. We do see, as Aaron described, a few buyers that still want a virtual interaction, but once the doors were, opened back up, so to speak, most customers reverted to wanting to come see the home in person. They like the appointment they like the appointment process. I think they feel more comfortable and they feel safer. So I do think that the beginning of the discussion where you talked about an acceleration, I think that's what we're seeing across the board in most of these cases. Is these things existed, work from home existed, the virtual appointments existed, the virtual tours, all of these things were sort of in our quiver of arrows, but it accelerated the use of them. And while I think over time there'll be a revert to the mean kind of, it won't go back to exactly where it was. We'll sort of live in a hybrid manner across all of these different practices.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in our situation, we don't sell directly to the consumer, but we do market the community. And so we focus a lot on the trails and the open space. We instigated some chat features so that we could engage with customers online, answer questions about the community, et cetera. And then working with our builder partners, developing virtual tours and those kinds of things that customers could use for that online experience.
So, Aaron, I know you talked about this a little bit earlier, and that was the contingent home buyer, where a common occurrence was to have this contingent home buyer, which meant that the new home sale was contingent upon the buyer selling their existing home, and that was affected as a result of existing homeowners not wanting to open up their homes to showings and just go through the logistics of that process. But I think you've seen that loosen a bit. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is interesting. During this pandemic, Highland has seen a pretty remarkable increase in first-time home buyers. That might be just the mix shifted, because those who have a home to sell and would be a second or a third or fourth time buyer may not want to list their home, to your point. But what is interesting is those buyers who come in to buy a new home from us, who do have a home to sell, used to result in a certain percentage of cancellations every year, just because they couldn't get their home sold or whatever. Now that's virtually zero. Just about every buyer who buys a home from us, who has a home to sell, they're selling their home pretty quickly. Why? Because there is such limited supply. So what used to be, we'd get to a certain stage of construction and we'd have the conversation and say, hey, you're still contingent. We need you to sell that home so you can release the contingency so we can keep going forward. We hardly even have those conversations anymore. People are just getting their homes sold that quick. Days on market, for most, not all, but for most existing homes, is extremely low, given the extremely low supply.
Well, thanks, Aaron. So any closing comments from our panelists?
I'll because I have a hard stop, I'll just go first, but I want to reiterate what Aaron said earlier about Texas Association of Builders. I have worked coast to coast, literally, in my career, and currently active in a number of different states, and TAB does a tremendous job. I think by far, from my exposure, the best builders association. We appreciate the advocacy. I want to thank everyone that is out there for today's session, for attending and visiting and reaching out to us, as I'm sure some of you will. I just saw a chat pop up asking if they could have contact information for us. I'll give that really quickly. It's very simple for me. It's tjacobs@mihomes.com. But thanks again, Bob. Thanks for the moderation that you did today. And thank you, Bill and Aaron. It's a real pleasure doing this with you guys.
Thanks, Tom. I enjoyed the conversation with you guys quite a bit. And I'll just go second for the contact information. I'm B. Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R, @newlandco.com. And feel free to shoot me an email. Bob, thanks for moderating. And TAB, thanks for putting this on. It was fun.
Aaron, you want to give your contact information?
Absolutely. It's aaron.graham, so Graham, @highlandhomes.com. So pretty straightforward. And I know we skirted the issue of predicting too much in the future because we really don't know. There's so much uncertainty. But honest to goodness, I don't know a better place to be in new home construction than the great state of Texas in 2020 and 2021. And I think the future is bright for us. A lot of uncertainty out there, but I'm pretty hopeful that we're going to have a nice year as an industry next year.
Well, thank you, Aaron. And my contact information is rburton @winstead, winstead.com. I'll reiterate what all the panelists said. Thank you, Tab. Thank you, Hotchkiss, for sponsoring this. Have a great rest of the year. Stay safe. And here's looking for a great 2021 for all of us. Bye-bye.